you ever walk through the hallways of a very old building, do you wonder what the walls, the stones, and the brick beneath your feet might have witnessed and remember? Do you ever wonder what exactly was the purpose of that old building and what built it? We follow the posthumous account of one H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Blake, in the moments leading up to his death from some profound shock introduced to his person. Blake is a writer and painter of myth, dream, terror, and superstition. He moved to Providence, where in the first year he produced some of his best works. It is his habit at sunset to gaze dreamily out the windows of his study, which afforded a remarkable view. Far off in the distance, westward from his study, amidst the quaint rooftops of the labyrinthian streets that crown Federal Hill, stood an old church, ill with dark repute and disquieting façade. Grim and austere, the church fascinated Blake. It drew him in, even as the aura of desolation that permeated it frightened and repulsed him. Despite many inquiries to his friends, Blake had been unable to uncover much about the old church, and finally, his curiosity overcoming him, he made his way to Federal Hill to find the church. It was not as easy a task as one would imagine. The streets were a bewildering maze that confounded his attempts to seek out his objective. A person of fanciful nature might even be forgiven if he thought the church might be evading Blake. Questioning the locals turned out to be for naught. One and all, they became fearful and pled ignorance clearly feigned. The church revealed itself to Blake in time, and there, against all sensible judgment, the author made his way in. Inside the dilapidated church, he found, to his horror, an extensive library of forbidden texts on the darkest secrets of the universe, giving hints to the nature of the evil purpose to which this church is dedicated. Upon further ingress, Blake stumbled into a room where a metal box with a peculiar asymmetrical form rested on a pillar. Within the box, a glowing, irregularly shaped stone was held. Blake was transfixed by the stone the moment his gaze rested on it, and it was long moments before he became aware of a body inside the room, the remains of a reporter whose curiosity and thirst for a story had led to his demise. The crumpled pocketbook the dead reporter held contained mentions of an artifact called the shining trapezohedron. Blake found his attention drawn back to the stone. Dark fascination gripped Blake, and vivid visions of robed inhuman figures in an endless desert lined with carved, sky-reaching monoliths filled his mind. He glimpsed into the infinity of darkness before fear and panic broke him from the compulsion that gripped him. Seizing the box, Blake closed the lid and covered the glowing stone from his sight and fled the church. The church did not relinquish its hold on Blake. In the days that followed, the doomed author continued to be haunted by the church. Frantically, he searched through his own library to uncover the origins of the church and what he found within. He learnt much, but not enough, and of what he discovered, none led to peace of mind. 4 months after Blake made his ill-considered expedition to the church, a great storm broke out over Providence. Eyewitness accounts spoke of a great shadow that lifted itself from the church. A great fetor came with it, choking bystanders. The formless cloud shot eastward with a meteor-like speed. A sharp flash of lightning soon followed, and an ear-splitting crash before the heavens opened up and wept. The next day, Blake was found dead in his study, sitting bolt upright at his desk by his window. His bulging eyes and twisted features spoke of a convulsive fright. The coroner noted cause of death as intense electrical shock from the lightning storm, ignoring the lack of any physical destruction of the structure as might follow a lightning strike, and the clear terror stamped upon the author's features, ignoring also the final desperate scrawl in Blake's diary. I see it. Coming here. Hell wind, titan blur, black wing. York Sothoth saved me. The tree-lobed burning eye. Dear readers, we present today The Haunter of the Dark by H.P. Lovecraft. And I'll save us all from more of my rambling and open up the floor to my co-hosts, Nikita Zuev and Robert Gibson. Well, would either one of you want to give your thoughts as to this short story?
I yield the floor to Mr. Gibson, the man who told us to review this story.
Yeah, right. Well, I find sleepwalking, somnambulism, a scary idea at the best of times. And what this story recounts, in between the introductory aspects which XJ has just mentioned and the conclusion which he's also just mentioned, in between those, we have a frightful incident where poor old Blake wakes up and finds he's been sleepwalking and he has walked into the place he most would rather not be, namely the attic of the Starry Wisdom Church. And that really is an example of Lovecraft's writing that actually does scare me. Usually I read Lovecraft because he inspires me with awe and wonder, not exactly because he scares me, but this did scare me. And I just wish that he was still around to appreciate how much I admire these rare moments. I think the story benefits tremendously from another aspect which occurs in the middle of the tale, namely towards the end, increasingly the juxtaposition of what would, on its own, be too much cosmic cosmicism, as you might call it, and the mundane preoccupation with the electricity supply in Providence, Rhode Island. The author's protagonist is increasingly obsessed with the need to keep the lights on because the thing which he unwisely awoke inside the church can't cross lighted areas. And the only advantage which humanity has in the face of this peril is if we can keep the lights on. And then there's a storm and the lights fail. And this is suspense for you. And he describes how the locals, I think it's mostly the Italians in the Italian district of Providence, who know that there's something that must not be allowed to get out of that Starry Wisdom Church. They crowd round it, holding candles and so on. And then there's a storm of rain, which puts out the candles. So, suspense piled on suspense. That's the sort of thing I admire when you're writing a horror story. Nikki, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, this is another tale by H.P. Lovecraft, the third one that we have looked at. Um, you know, while Call of Cthulhu is the golden standard that I would go to, The Haunter of the Dark is probably one of the most interesting tales when it comes to just being so fractured and yet being able to tell an interesting narrative. Even though you know this man is going to die in the end, his investigation is fascinating, and you wish to see more of his thoughts. In fact, I think purposely H.P. Lovecraft tries to keep us away from being too, um, too accustomed to our protagonist, and constantly inserts, like aftermath reports and musings of other individuals, so that we are left in the dark to guess as to what truly is happening and what are the real thoughts of our investigator. I also like the fact that he calls out to Velusia and the Serpent Man, something that we reviewed not so long ago in the Shadow Kingdom. Um, the fact that these creatures were the ones who found the object in question, and also the mention of Atlantis and all those other interesting tidbits that happen in the middle. I live for stuff like that. It's fun little nods that H.P. Lovecraft is doing to acknowledge his fellow authors. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the last story that was published during H.P. Lovecraft's life, and it shows. It's very well written, in my opinion. It has a lot of the tropes and common features of his other works, but that does not make it weaker. In fact, it makes it stronger. For everything that's good about Lovecraft is contained within The Haunter of the Dark. It was a very enjoyable read for me. There you go. Back to you, Extreme.
Cool. And yes, if any of our readers are fans of the triumvirate, that is to say Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft, you would really appreciate the little nods H.P. Lovecraft gave in his story, because although he didn't mention anything directly linked to Clark Ashton Smith's work, I can't help but notice that this is in spirit a very similar story to one of the Clark Ashton Smith story that we actually discussed, which is the one that happened in the French countryside with another old church, or is it tower, off in the distance that is haunted. Yeah, so it could possibly be also a nod to Clark Ashton Smith in that way. That said, I find the best thing about this story is the superb penmanship on the atmospherics. It is very, very good at describing the atmosphere surrounding not just the church, but also some of the visions that Blake unfortunately started seeing once he got in contact with the shining trapezohedron. I have to be careful when I say that word because it's very it will twist my tongue.
I've elected not to say it for that very same reason.
Yes, the shining thingamajiggy. It's like the endless desert and procession of strange inhuman rope figures with monoliths reaching to the sky. That is something I would expect to see in a H.R. Geiger painting, or one of those that Polish painter that I unfortunately can never remember the name of. Some paintings like that, that it evokes the kind of atmosphere and imagery in my mind, and I find that the fact that H.P. Lovecraft dared, in a sense, to structure his story around an actually known place, Federal Hill, and then sort of imbue it with some very odd, a sense of haunting wrongness about that hill, with the way the church just seemingly defies Blake's attempts to find it the first time round, and all that. It's like a place that you're familiar with, and then you take that and then you turn it in your story into some effectively into some place that is very strange and off-putting and disquieting. I think that takes real skill, and he did it rather well with that church in Federal Hill.
It exists, actually, or it
Yes.
did exist.
I mean,
church.
H.P. Lovecraft lived in Providence. Yeah,
there we are.
there we go.
Right.
That church. It does exist, and he lives in that place, and he took that real landmark, which people presumably pass by every day, and then turn it into this thing. And I find that to be a very masterfully way to write. That's it. Blake is an empty vessel, as much as our astronaut in an episode that we covered earlier. He is there to just push the story. There is nothing to him, except perhaps curiosity and a whole lot of fear, because he awoke something he shouldn't have. And I think the story would have might have benefited greatly if either Blake or the narrator had been more present inside the story itself. Although it would have been a device that H.P. Lovecraft used quite often. He very much liked to use the trope of a writer or a researcher of some sort who stumbled upon a dark secret, which then took him into places that he shouldn't have been to. I think that is the case for the Dunwich Horror in a sense. That is also the case for Shadow over Innsmouth, and the Call of Cthulhu is also something like that. And it does if you read the story in isolation and Blake was brought more present to us, the readers, it would have been fine. But in context of his entire body of work, it reminds me of another writer by the name of L.E. Modesitt Jr., who is like, you read one of his books, you've read all of his books. He's a very good writer, and I really enjoyed his story. But really, you read one series, you read all of them. Yeah, those are my thoughts. However, at the end of the day, though, if you are the kind of person that really thrives on atmosphere, then this story is absolutely for you. It is great at doing that. Yeah. Back to you guys. Any more words?
Yeah, well, the protagonist Blake is actually modelled on Robert Bloch, a writer whom Lovecraft knew, a fellow contributor to Weird Tales, actually. Bloch had just written a story called The Shambler from the Stars, in which someone very much like H.P. Lovecraft met a sticky end. And so in friendly revenge, Lovecraft wrote this story in which someone whose name is almost like Robert Bloch also meets a sticky end.
Yes,
And
I was
Bloch
wondering.
then wrote a third story in the series, from what I remember.
It's
He
interesting.
wrote
I
a
was
sequel.
wondering if Blake referred either to H.P. Lovecraft himself or the person he dedicated this story to, which you could see. That's a really fun thing in the background to find out.
The from what at least I remember, the sequel consists of like the last point of the story is that somebody throws the artifact into the water, right? So I think the sequel was something about the darkness in the sea actually activating it, right? And the horrible things happening because of it.
Right. The activation of the Haunter of the Dark itself, the summons of the Haunter of the Dark is, I think the author gets away with it, but it's not clear at all why it should be summoned just because this Blake fellow was pottering around in the church and he sees this trapezohedron. You see, I can say it.
Show off.
And just yeah, just seeing it seems to have been enough, and I quite like that. I think it was quite daring of the author to structure the story in that way, though, because you might get lots of nitpickers saying, "Yeah, but why should the thing come along just because you happen to see the thing?" But he manages to get away with it by means of suggestiveness. Just feels a sense of being watched, and just looking at the thing was enough. Very nightmarish.
I rather imagined it as like a great beast that was sleeping when the the reporter Edward, whatever his name is, first stumbled into the church, and it didn't became aware of the reporter. But when Blake came about, and the beast was kind of like in a mood that is halfway between sleeping, and then when Blake stumbled around, the beast went like, he opened one eye, and what's this thing crawling around my nest? Yeah, that's how I see it in my mind's eye anyway.
Yeah. Well, space, there are shortcuts through space once you start being multidimensional. So I guess
think-
Yuggoth
yeah.
isn't that far away in some ways.
That's right. It's just around the corner. I think if you want to get the full experience of this tale, you have to wait for a night where there's a thunderstorm, right? And turn off all the lights, get a bunch of candles, and just read it on a piece of paper. Like turn off all the technology. And I think you'll get it. Be right in there.
Yeah, we ought to have had a candlelit podcast for this one, really.
Well, that could be that is something we should have done.
Yeah.
I mean, the Halloween episode is coming up, so we might want to do something regarding
That is interesting. I don't know if our cameras can capture us, but it would be very interesting if we're all in candlelight and.
I've done it before for my D&D sessions.
Good idea, Robert. We will think about how to achieve that.
Yeah, and we could end the podcast with a blood-curdling scream. Instead of
Yeah,
saying,
and then we all blow, one by one, we all blow out our candles, and there's a heart-curdling scream.
That'd be very entertaining. All right.
Right. Well, it's spoiled now. Everyone who's listening to this podcast. But imagine, we're gonna do all that and pretend like we didn't tell you.
Yeah. Okay. Wipe this from your memory, dear
That's right.
listeners, and pretend.
Yeah, hold
you
on.
like
Let me
you
get
never...
that Men in Black device. Have you seen Men in Black, Robert?
Yeah.
So I really love that movie.
The first one was.
I think
the first one was quite memorable.
the fact that oh god, Will Smith, Will Smith's character shoots the little girl, and it has like this crazy explanation for it. I was very surprised that it didn't turn out to be like a joke where then Tommy Lee Jones speaks to his boss and he's like, no, this man is crazy, you can't go in there, you just killed the little girl. Like,
the picture of one, not a real little girl.
yeah. There's like, for those of you who haven't seen it.
Who haven't seen it.
Yeah.
At
Basically,
this point, whoever hasn't seen it is not something we would care about spoiling for anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna explain the scene. So, the Will Smith and a bunch of other people, some of them are from special forces, some of them are from FBI and whatever. They've all been invited by the Men in Black to test their skill, right? And there's a moment in this test where there's like a shooting range, and they're going through a dark city, and there's a bunch of aliens in there. And all of the other guys are shooting the aliens, and Will Smith is like, oh god, there's a little girl, and she's got like an algebra book for like people who are 10 years older than her. That's weird. I'm gonna shoot her. What if she was going back home to her brother? Like to bring him the algebra book. Okay, whatever, dude. Like, logic doesn't make any sense.
I think it does though, because the movie is about aliens hiding amongst us, right? So
Right.
I mean,
Right, but then
it is
you've got.
still pretty twisted. I'll give you that.
I mean, the thing is that like there's like a bunch of aliens on the street already. So like, what is the point of the test? It's like who. Not only that, I think that it's kind of, to me at least, it just seems like impossible that somebody would figure this out, right? It kind of like you're looking around. How would you know? Oh yeah, like let me make all these quick calculations.
I
I'm gonna look
mean,
at this girl more than for 5 seconds.
I mean the thing is, you know that movie, right? It actually made a point about how all those tabloid space alien stories are actually the truth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's like all those paranoid people who think they've been taken up to space, they are telling the truth. So if you, it's like celebrating that paranoia. So if Will Smith, I'm like, but still, it is quite twisted.
Well, the chap we've been talking about, H.P. Lovecraft, is the ideal author for
Who?
paranoiacs.
Oh, H.P. Lovecraft, right?
Yeah, yeah. I want to take up a point Nikki made about it being an extremely well-written story. It's this sentence here when he's been suddenly woken up and found himself having sleepwalked into the Starry Wisdom Church, and he rushes away. And I wouldn't dare write like this, but he says there was a nightmare flight through a vast cobweb nave whose ghostly arches reached up to realms of leering shadow, a sightless scramble through a littered basement, a climb to regions of air and streetlights outside, and a mad racing down a spectral hill of gibbering gables across a grim, silent city. Now, gibbering gables, actually, I tend to pronounce it gibbering, but I think gibbering is the right way. Wow, I wouldn't dare write gibbering or gibbering gables.
Hey, it's alliteration.
Well, I know, that's why I wouldn't dare do it, because it sounds like something stupid out of a tabloid newspaper.
Yeah,
but
it's like
works.
jumping Jupiter. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. But he gets away with it. That's the thing about great authors. They get away with what lesser mortals
Right.
would not be wise to risk.
It must be a torturous experience to be H.P. Lovecraft. I'm gonna have to say, seeing that sort of stuff in your mind and all that.
Yeah.
Because I can't help but think that a lot of the things that H.P. Lovecraft wrote is something that he dreams about. And it's just a very unfortunate existence, I think.
He probably ate lots of cheese or raw meat before turning in, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you're a horror writer, it's a good idea to do that, of course.
Well, I mean, a lot of the times, at least reading from their biographies and experiences, authors tend to be individuals who, who embrace the emotion that they're feeling and they put it upon the page, or in reversal of that, are trying to get away from the feeling that they are feeling. And they use writing as an outlet, right? Someone could be very angry and write an incredible fight scene because of it, because you can literally picture how he's thinking about clubbing the neighbor in the face because he's been grassing the lawn for too long, and the annoying sound has made this guy think about a terrible fight scene. Spectacular fight scene, let's say. Or it could be somebody trying to escape their anxiety, trying to focus on something else and fueling this anxiousness out from them as a vessel, siphoning this into pages they are writing upon. Inspiration comes from hundreds of different places.
A lot of
Yeah.
Stephen King's books were about him as a really greatly messed up individual who had drank too much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite explicit in some of them. He writes about Alcoholics Anonymous in one of his stories. Forget which one. Might be The Library Policeman. Not sure.
He's written plenty. The Dark Half, I think, is literally his writing about his the period in his time when he was a very angry person and alcoholic to boot.
I guess I suppose that applies the writing to exorcise your inner demons might apply to applies well to Ed Lovecraft probably, and also to Robert E. Howard. Perhaps not so much to Clark Ashton Smith, who was just someone who liked playing with words and lived in the world of his own in that sense. But you never know. Not so much is known about him.
Yes. Well, the moral of the story is if you're a well-adjusted person, you're not going to be a good writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think we all agree that the story is pretty good on its own. Do we have...
It's one of those tales that it's hard to describe why it's good, and it's hard to really get it down in words, because it's more of a feeling, it's more of an emotion that you feel while reading it. Because if we are, at least me, if I'm honest, if you're like just put, if you do like a really basic bullet point summary of this tale, it kind of sounds boring. Man goes in like in chapel, gets scared, dies of fright at home. Like nothing happens. But because it's described so interestingly, and because of all the tropes that H.P. Lovecraft uses, investigation, parallel narrative, like the frightful wording that he, that he creates, it becomes something far greater than the sum of its parts.
I agree, actually.
Any story could be dismissed with the sufficiently boring summary. Small person gets chased by black riders, walks to mountain, throws ring into mountain.
Well, that's not an honest bullet point, though. There's a lot more than happens there. This short story, my bullet points are quite accurate. That's literally all that happens in the story, right?
Yeah,
you have missed a lot of things in that trilogy before,
I mean, the one thing that H.P. Lovecraft really excelled in this short story I would like to repeat is just the atmosphere. It's really, really good. Like the way he painted how is that the scene about the church really stands out, but also the beginning where it was so mundane, and it's just about a guy who moved to Providence and then he writes for a living. It's a very it actually starts off, well, not the beginning part, but around when he was describing Blake's existence in Providence and the leisurely way he goes about it. Well, it is leisurely. I think he would have I think there was one line, can't remember exactly how it went, but he was accompanied by a great deal of very friendly cats and stuff like that. It's like totally not 180 degree picture from what happened later. And so I think like the real strength exhibited in this short story is the the ability that H.P. Lovecraft have of creating a mood to draw the reader in.
Yeah. And the last bit where there's this confusion of identity between Blake and the thing which is about to get him. Lovecraft wrote about this in a letter shortly before he died, the month before he died. In a letter to one of his correspondents, he says, and I quote from Lovecraft now: "The night monster has secured a hold upon Blake's brain, partly penetrating it, almost effecting an exchange of personalities. Blake could not think for himself or protect himself. With a clear head, something might have been done, but the thing had already seized his brain." So that's how the author thought of it, and it's more or less how he wrote it, isn't it? But he wrote it not as explicitly as that.
Yes. Yeah, in many ways, I think what really I think writing horror is one of those skills where you need to know how to give just enough but not everything away. Yeah.
Yes. As in I am it and it is I. I want to get out, must get out and unify the forces.
What's your personal favorite section, Robert?
I think it has to be the sleepwalk, finding, as I said, that you sleepwalk into the place you most want not to be in. That is really something.
And what about you, XJ?
For me, it would be the room that where Blake found shining trapezohedron. Trapezohedron. Yes, it's very, very well described. I think like I can actually see it in my mind's eye, and it totally makes spatial sense because like one of the skills I've developed over the years is to be able to construct in my mind how a location or how an object actually might look and rotate it around inside my head. And so like descriptions like that actually have weight and feels like it's a real thing matter to me. And so not only does the location itself make sense, but also it does feel very creepy. Like I can see the strange metal box. I can see the bas relief that's carved all over it. I can see the glowing rock that's so fascinated Blake, and most likely also led to the doom of the reporter. Yeah. That probably is my favorite scene, just how well described it is. What about you, Nikki? Oh, sorry, Robert, you were going to say something.
So, yeah, following on from what you were saying about the locality, I wondered if perhaps nowadays in Providence, Rhode Island, there are Lovecraftian tours. You know, you can perhaps go and see these places.
That would be
Sorry, Wisdom Church, because apparently it's been knocked down.
Oh, what a shame.
Sorry, interrupted.
Not at all. I was just going to hand it over to Nikki and ask him what his favorite section is.
When Blake finds the skeleton of the reporter and has to confront all his notes and go through them, and learn things about the town, the investigation that the reporter never got to finish. That kind of led him into believing into what's going on more and more. I think that's the scene that truly begins the, actually frighten the reader, because you find a dead skeleton in some church. Well, I mean, not like you could find an alive skeleton, to be honest, but yes, you find a skeleton, and you have to confront with the fact that now you're dealing with a human body laying in this church, and this is no longer like, oh, the villagers are looking at me weirdly, or saying strange things, and I can't believe them. You have real evidence in front of you, so you got to do something about it now. Yeah. It's a turning point.
Yeah. I wonder what the people who went to that church, it was actually a Catholic church, St. John's Catholic Church, that Lovecraft borrowed for this story. I wonder what they thought, if any of them read the story, and particularly if the priest read the story. You might say, hang on, this is a bit off. We're not quite like that. But anyway, this church no
we
longer...
bury the people we kill in our church. Come on.
Well, if anyone lives in Rhode Island and wants to share his thoughts on how Lovecraft might have affected the local tourism, put it in the comment section below.
I mean, some of his stories we don't exactly have literal equivalents for. I mean, there's no actual such place as Innsmouth, for example, but Providence, Rhode Island, that's a definitely a real place.
Yes, you can find Federal Hill, in fact, in Google Maps.
So there we are. Well, people can make money out of any sort of tourism. I mean, apparently in London there's a Jack the Ripper tour that you can go on.
No, really? Yes. I know that's already a fake 22B Baker Street.
Yes, that would have to be a fake, but I mean, yeah.
Wow.
And also in Chicago, I believe there are Al Capone tours. So a friend tells me.
Interesting. Yes. Well, if there's a way to make money, people will find it. All right. Do we have anything else we want to mention about Haunter in the Dark, or is it Haunter in the Darkness? Haunter of the Dark?
Haunter of the Dark.
Not about Haunter of the Dark specifically, but it's just a musing I had regarding all of H.P. Lovecraft's work. And that's whatever the terrible thing is that's chasing the character, or the character is trying to find out about, ultimately, almost all of them are reflections of humanity. Even though there are these otherworldly forces, like, for example, in this story, clearly, right, the Haunter of the Dark is one of the earliest fears of humanity, of the dark, right? Because in the dark, horrible things happen, right? And the same is true with Call of Cthulhu. At least to me, it seems like force of nature being this fear. And the other story that we looked at, excuse me, I forget its name, but
Horror of Dunwich, I believe.
Dunwich horror. Dunwich horror. Yeah, there it's it's clearly representing the fear of humanity against itself. What it can itself bring forth through creating
unwise liaisons with
exactly
Yog Sothoth and so on. Yeah,
right. So I'm because of that, I guess my thought was, what would an H.P. Lovecraft story look like that has no such theme, that has the fear come not from something that we would understand, but something so otherworldly that you couldn't really pinpoint it to a large theme like that. Um, and I've been trying to remember if there is anything like that. Maybe The Color Out of Space, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah. It's one of his own favorite among his stories, that was, but I never liked it, actually.
No, you don't like color. Why don't you like The Color Out of Space?
It's not as cheerful as his other stories, like
Wait,
the one
cheerful? That
it's not as cuddly and cheerful, and cozy.
meaning is even more depressing than usual. Okay.
It's totally depressing. It's depressing from first to last. Yeah, and that's all it is.
I have read another story outside of the podcast from H.P. Lovecraft before, and I keep mixing it up. I don't know if it's The Mountains of Madness or The Color of Space, but would that be the one where there is this writer that slowly descends into madness every day? He's struggling with unseen cult. I mean, I just realized I basically described all of Lovecraft's stories.
I don't know what the one you mean, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. There's the thing on the doorstep is a bit like what you're saying, but not totally.
Well,
anyway,
forget that I said anything then.
Go for investigation. Right.
Yeah. Mind wipe.
Oh yeah, somebody bring out the stick from Men in Black. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, the color out of space. The Hunter of the Dark. The Hunter of the Dark gets a solid 7.5 out of 10 from me. I would give it more if I did not consider the fact that I just need a little bit more explanation from Lovecraft. He showed it to me in Dunwich Horror, and now that's what I want. So him copying out a bunch of times in the story, I'm bringing it down. So next time, HP, I'm expecting better things.
If there is a next time from H.P. Lovecraft, I'm not reading it. No.
If there is one, I'm definitely reading. If he's like writing Beyond the Grave, it's got to be something. I mean, imagine the powers you would have to summon to do so. It has to be worth reading if he's done it.
I like my peace of mind. I'm a very well-adjusted individual. That's why I'm a boring writer. All right. What about you, Robert? What's your score?
Well, I think I'll give it a 10. I would give it more only.
Oh wow! What a shocker!
Allow it. But the thing is, I probably grade stories under a different system from you chaps. I give scores according to how well the story fulfills what it sets out to do, rather than how good it is in an absolute sense. So in other words, imagine two containers of liquid, a big beer tankard and just a small whiskey glass. If they're both full, I give them 10, even though, of course, the beer tankard contains a lot more than the little whiskey glass.
So you judge a story by how well it succeeds in what it sets out to do.
Yeah, in its aims, yes. And I think this one succeeds. I can't think of any nits to pick on this one.
Fair enough.
If what you were saying was true, you would give The Color Out of Space 10 out of 10 because it aims to be depressing as hell and is depressing as hell.
Hey, that's quite a powerful argument. Yeah. Yeah,
I'll
think about that one. I might give it 10 out of 10, but a recommendation that nevertheless
Not
one
to
should
read it.
read.
Yeah, I see. Well, Robert, your logic is, as always, flawless.
Unassailable. Impeccable.
Well, okay, actually, because his logic is so illogical, it's impervious to any critique. Like there's nothing to fight but shadows. You will just hit yourself eventually.
Very Lovecraftian description of you, Nikki.
I am only japing, but it does annoy me that Robert keeps giving 10 out of 10s to almost anything. I just, I just want to review bad things, so that I don't hear 10 out of 10.
So shall we do another Dragonlance story? The next
No,
one.
no.
Yeah. Let's do that. The Dragons of Internight. All right, let's do it.
I'd rather talk about paint drying on my walls for like about 40 minutes than review another Dragonlance. I will read it eventually, the second book, but some time must come between that.
Well,
and
then you don't feel strongly enough about making Robert give a bad score.
Oh, I'm sure there's something that's less than 300 pages that's also bad.
All right. Well,
Well, there's some Lovecraft stuff that's pretty bad, actually. There's The
here we go.
Lurking Fear. That's one of the worst stories I've ever read.
I mean, okay, it's not that good, but I wouldn't say it's bad.
Wouldn't you?
Okay, why do you say The Lurking Fear is bad?
Well, because it's just a load of mush of undifferentiated horror. It's like having a plate full of mustard. All right, I like mustard in moderation, but I wouldn't eat a whole plate full of the stuff.
Right, but when you say that the Hour of the Dragon is basically the same, because it's like a bunch of things that Conan the Barbarian usually does in the stories.
No.
What do you mean?
This is where I remember XJ criticizing it because it's very episodic, but I don't agree. I think it's very tightly structured, The Hour of the Dragon. This is where we'll have to disagree, I think. I would say it has an excellent structure, which you can follow if you want to take the trouble. I mean, better just to enjoy it. But if you really wanted to study its structure, you would find that it's like there's a good skeleton to it.
I think you misunderstood me. I'm just saying that the collection of tropes is the same. I'm not criticizing the structure of the Hour of the Dragon nor of its quality. I'm merely pointing out the Hour of the Dragon contains a lot of things that make Conan the Barbarian, and they are, in sequence throughout the book. He speaks to the guy, he goes, fights people. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yes, but also the background through which Conan moves is as excellently described as the man himself. Whereas in The Lurking Fear, I admit I didn't really read it properly. I found it impossible to digest, but it's just like the worst kind of hypertrophy of adjectivitis that Lovecraft was ever guilty of, all put into one wodge. It doesn't seem to actually be saying anything with any variety in it. It's just like listening to the most boring type of rock music that just goes thump, thump, thump. And that's it.
Well, there you go. Lurking Fear gets 1 out of 10. We didn't even need to do an episode on it.
But what if that was what H.P. Lovecraft set out to do with The Lurking Fear?
What if you wanted to bore you, Robert? Yeah, okay, that's the perfect defense right there of the illogical logic. If a writer wanted you to think the story is bad, wouldn't you have to give them a 10 out of 10 for getting what he set out to do?
Highly unlikely, I would say. Highly unlikely, unless he was possessed by the crawling chaos Azathoth or someone of that ilk.
You know, Robert,
Temporarily.
I will ask you one more question. You know, as someone who has consumed Clark Ashton Smith, H.P. Lovecraft, and Robert E. Howard, did you ever felt a tingling, a desire to do a pastiche to either of those three? You
Well, I
know, as an
already have
author.
done a pastiche of Clark Ashton Smith. It's called The Archives of the Moon, and it's on my website.
Oh, well, there you go. A little plug-in for the website. Maybe there'll be a link in the
Mm.
description below. What about the other two titans?
I don't think I would want to do those because for some reason, I don't know why not, I feel further away from the talents necessary to do that. Although I'm not setting myself up as a equal of Clark Ashton Smith, I feel on the same wavelength stylistically, whereas Howard and Lovecraft are they just are not. That it's like if I had started from the year dot, from like a 4-year-old training, I might have been able to fly a spaceship. But as the Apollo astronauts did, I don't know, but I might have. But I would never be able to become an opera star like Pavarotti. Some things I just aren't in me to do, and writing like Howard or Lovecraft are examples of those things.
I would want to, at some point, write a pastiche on Conan. You know, in my lifetime. That's for
Yeah, I'm
sure
sure
something
you could do
I'm
that.
dreaming.
I'm sure you could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. And
Yeah.
and anyway, sorry for taking those two detours. Actually, what is your score for The Hunter of the Dark?
I'm gonna do a bit of the kind of cop out that Robert usually does.
Okay.
I'm gonna give it a 8 out of 10 for atmosphere, and 2 out of 10 for
Love interest.
no. That would be a 0 out of 10. There's no love interest. I don't know quite how to describe it, but there is a sameness to the way H.P. Lovecraft writes. The paragraphs are all the same length, and one of the things that I found challenging while writing the summary is actually referring back, like trying to find the thing that I was referring to, because all the paragraphs are all the same, and so it was very easy to miss my mark. So like the pacing of the writing itself, the rhythm is very samey, and this is something in general that I feel about H.P. Lovecraft. It's like I have trouble differentiating all the different stories that he writes, and to me that is a sign that the author is doesn't really venture outside of his confines. Like it's like that guy I mentioned earlier, L.E. Modesett Jr. You read one of his stories, you basically read all of his stories. Some might be more expanded upon than others, but at the end of the day, it's like there's just like nothing differentiating all the different stories that he might have wrote. And so H.P. Lovecraft gets a 2 out of 10 from me for that. But the atmosphere, like I said, is top notch.
Well, you've raised a hugely important point there, XJ, which we'll have to discuss in some other podcast because we're running out of time in this one. But very, very contentious point, but worth following up.
Well, then let's end on that cliffhanger, shall we? With
To be continued.
To be continued.
The lurking fear. Yes, we'll make you suffer, Robert. We'll read The Lurking Fear.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more last words to add, then do we have any last words to add?
Yeah, just a quick thing to the people who are watching the podcast and stuff. Little by little, I've been working on a short story that I'm planning to send to publishers, and then
Amazing.
thank you very much. And once it's sent and I get all of that stuff, we will also do a review of it on the podcast.
Nice. Looking forward to it. All right. And with that, dear viewers, please support us on the podcast, help us grow bigger, and then we might have the wherewithal to tackle even more contentious works like perhaps the Malazan Book of the Fallen or some other works. And you guys have a great day out there. Take care.